Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Euan Wallace. I'm the chair of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynaecology, and welcome to this sort of student research open event, slightly different as usual for all the obvious reasons. It's my pleasure to MC this, and initially our Deputy Head of Department, Beverley Vollenhoven, Professor Beverley Vollenhoven, had intended to give you an overview of the department, but unfortunately for family reasons she can't be here. So I'm going to do that and then introduce you sequentially to some of our leading researchers in the department to share with you the opportunities that exist both within their own labs and research groups and others. This half an hour is about our clinical trials and epidemiology research, and immediately following this there's another half an hour about our more fundamental discovery research. So please join both of these sessions to get a feel for the broad scope of research that's available in women's and perinatal health in the department. Let me quickly give you a very brief overview of where we fit into the research precinct here at Monash Medical Centre in Clayton. So we are a department within the School of Clinical Sciences here in the hospital, and our research is all conducted within the Ritchie Centre, and the Ritchie Centre has a foot both within the university, so it's a designated Monash University Research Centre, but also has a foot in the independent Hudson Institute of Medical Research. And many of our researchers have dual appointments. Some have sole appointments with the university and some have sole appointments with the Hudson. But we all come together to do our research together in the Ritchie Centre. And these are the major research themes in the Ritchie Centre: women's health, fetal and neonatal health, both for respiratory and cardiovascular medicine and brain injury neurodevelopment, infant and child health, infection, inflammation, immunity, and cell therapy and regenerative medicine. You'll hear about some of the opportunities in all of these themes this afternoon, except for infant and child health, because that, of course, is done in the Department of Pediatrics, that's also a research partner in the Ritchie Centre. And these are some of the research groups that you're going to hear from the leaders of many of these groups this afternoon. I'm just going to leave this up for a second because what I've done here is to try and summarize the key research topics that underpin the current research activities of the department, and against them put the key names. These names are not exhaustive, but they are the lab leaders or the group leaders, and they all have Monash University, standard Monash University email addresses. And so if you were to write down the names against topics and you just add it at monash.edu, you'll find them and you'll be able to get in touch with them and then share your interest in perhaps doing research with them next year. So I'm now going to hand over to Dr. Miranda Davies-Tuck, and she's going to tell you a wee bit about her research and the broader research interests in epidemiology in the department. Miranda.
Unmute, Miranda.
That's right. I kept being muted by the host. Hi, everyone. So as Euan said, I'm Miranda Davies-Tuck, and I'm a perinatal epidemiologist. So the work that I am involved in is quite diverse, and it is therefore also very collaborative. The broader team includes not just other epidemiologists, but also clinicians, basic scientists, and I do also work with government and consumer or special interest groups. My work spans from discovery science, where we may collect biological tissue or samples from women, such as their placenta, to look at differences or identify biomarkers that relate to different outcomes in pregnancy that we might be interested in. I also undertake epidemiological studies, where we may look at clinical information from medical records. We might collect information directly from women themselves, or we can even use routinely collected data from large population data sets to address our specific research questions. For example, we may wish to understand the relationships between trends in risk factors or changes to clinical practice that we know are occurring on different outcomes for women and their babies. These studies then can inform changes to practice that we are then able to implement and then go on to also evaluate. A really good example of this is the work that I do in relation to stillbirth prevention. So we identified at a population level that certain groups of women experience much higher rates of stillbirth at term. We then looked deeper at their clinical data and also biological data. And together, these studies identified a potential target or change in clinical care that we could implement to reduce stillbirth rates. And so in 2017, we implemented this change at Monash Health, and then have spent the last 12 months or so evaluating what happened. Did it improve outcomes? Did it cause harm? What did staff think? And what did women think? And so complementing these database studies and implementation projects, my research also spans into randomised control trials that relate to interventions not only in pregnancy and labour, but also in the neonatal space with my neonatology colleagues. For example, I have a trial currently underway that is looking at whether giving melatonin to women undergoing induction and labour improves their chance of having a vaginal birth. So as you can see, the breadth of my work is actually quite wide, and I haven't really focused here on the key pregnancy conditions that my work focuses on, although Euan did put me against stillbirth and home birth on that last slide. But really, I'm interested in everything. Ultimately, the key themes that underpin all of my research relates to equity and striving to ensure that all women and their babies can experience good outcomes, and they also all have access to high evidence-based care. So that's me in a nutshell. Was that 3 minutes?
Thanks, Miranda. Terrific. So some of you have already started using the Q&A feature of the event. So please do that. Ask questions as we go along, and we'll answer them as best we can as we go along. And if there are any left over, we'll come back to you with answers to those. Miranda, thank you so much. So I'm now going to cut to Professor Ben Moll. Ben, over to you.
Yeah, and now I think I am unmuted, correct?
Yes.
You hear me? Yeah, so thanks for that introduction, and thanks for organizing this event. Always exciting to talk to new colleagues, albeit in a different form. So my name is Ben Moll. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist, trained and raised in the Netherlands. Came 6 years ago to Adelaide, and since 2 years in Melbourne now, and I love it, despite the difficult times we have. So I have 2 slides. So this is a key slide that summarizes my thinking, because these are 3,000 mixed interventions that we do in medicine. And what is indicated here by green is that we do it and we know that it works. Red is we do it and we could know that it doesn't work, and there's a little bit in between. But the big elephant in the room is orange. We do it, but we actually don't know whether it helps our clients. Now, call me any CEO of a big company with the size of medicine who can't tell you whether 50% of the interventions help their clients. And that's really something that I think you should keep in mind. David Sackett, one of my heroes, the inventor of evidence-based medicine, said half of what you learn in clinical school is either dead wrong or out of date by the time of you graduate. The trouble is you don't know which half. So next slide. So we work obviously to see if we can solve that. And my thinking is in this scheme. So it's all around effectiveness. Do the things that we do actually work? Do they make outcomes for patients better? We summarize them in guidelines. We try to implement them, and we try to measure if we actually implement those guidelines the right way. And at the same time, we wait for new interventions and ideas to come in, and we evaluate them ideally when they enter the system. But as you can see from the last slide, that's often not the case. So I would very much welcome you to engage in this type of work. We do larger clinical trials on a national scale. I'm involved in trials in an international scale, and we do smaller trials. And we also review the literature and do meta-analysis, and that is potentially better suited for students to start. One thing important to say about the many good things of the department is that we have a very wide international network, and not for now, I would say, because we're bound to the country at this stage, but I'm optimistic that in 2021 we can travel again. And you're very welcome to be engaged also with colleagues overseas and go there, and we really can help you in getting an introduction. So don't hesitate to make an appointment and reach out. Happy to take any questions, and I give back to you.
Ben, thank you so much. Terrific. So I'm now going to cut to Professor Graham Jenkin, and Graham, over to you.
Thank you. First slide, please. My name is Graham Jenkin. I work at the Ritchie Centre with Euan Wallace, and the Ritchie Centre, as Euan has said, is the research arm of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynaecology. I put this slide up to show that we have a large group working on neuroprotection and neuroregeneration in neonates and cell therapy and regenerative medicine. We have a big group of scientists, PhD, postdocs, and clinicians, and so we're ideally placed for the next slide. Next slide. Thank you. To combat the so-called valley of death. This is a transition from preclinical to clinical research, and examples of this I've shown up here. We have in our animal facility a LICU, a lamb intensive care unit, which to all intents and purposes is set up like the NICU upstairs, except for here we have a lamb in a cooling blanket where we can undertake our preclinical studies on therapies that we may be able to use clinically. We also have the capacity for early detection. We have state-of-the-art imaging, including MRI, and I put this up because this is one of only 2 MRI-compatible humidicrits in the country to enable us to undertake early detection of brain injury. Next slide, please. Oh. Oops. Thank you. So I'm particularly interested in the use of umbilical cord blood in clinical trials for the treatment and prevention of cerebral palsy. You might ask why cord blood? Well, a meta-analysis and systematic review by Iona Novak from the Alliance and Euan Wallace showed that it was the most effective cell type in improving motor function in individuals. Next slide, please. Next slide, Euan. Thank you. We think that's because of the multiple cell types which are present in umbilical cord blood, which are anti-inflammatory, immunosuppressive, and vasoactive. And so this is why we've chosen this cell type. Next slide, please. And so my final slide just shows an example of some of the studies that we're doing. And this is a world first cord-safe study of early intervention in the use of cord blood in a clinical trial in extremely preterm infants. This is Atul Malhotra, a neonatologist who's leading this trial. And we really look forward to discussing these type of trials with you. So if you're interested in neonatal or fetal well-being, and you're interested in clinical trials, particularly in stem cells, do come and talk to us. And Susie Miller will be talking in the next session about some of the studies that we're doing. Thank you, Euan.
Great, thanks, Graham. And actually, one of your questions were about, can BSc students do clinical stuff? So just both Miranda and Graham are PhDs rather than clinicians, and yet they're both doing very clinically facing research. And you can see here's a clinical trial being done by Graham and his colleagues. And Kirsten, over to you.
Thanks, Euan. So I'm Kirsten. I am a clinician. So I'm an obstetrician and maternal fetal medicine specialist at Monash Health, and also a senior lecturer within the Department of O&G at Monash Uni. And I guess I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the research that we do within the department in that clinical space as well. And the focus of a lot of my research is in the disorders of placentation. These disorders cause conditions such as preeclampsia and fetal growth restriction, which are very, very common disorders that impact pregnancy. And although scientifically we're starting to get a much greater understanding of what underpins these disorders, at a clinical level, our management really has changed very, very little in recent decades. And unfortunately, these disorders are still major causes of death and disability for mothers and for babies in pregnancy, but also have huge ramifications for their health going forward in life post-pregnancy as well. So in terms of some of the research that I do, very much like Graham and Miranda, it really does span all the way from the laboratory through to epidemiology-based research right through to clinical trial. Some of the more epi-focused research that we're doing at the moment is really also, as Ben said, kind of trying to tease apart some of those suppositions that you're taught through university and then in early clinical life, such that even long-held beliefs about what defines high blood pressure has never actually been explored in pregnancy. So we've done some research recently that has really looked at potentially completely redefining what is hypertension in pregnancy. And similarly, looking at the impact that pre-existing medical disorders can have on the risk of developing preeclampsia, what that preeclamptic phenotype looks like, and then what risks that might carry for women and for babies in those pregnancies. And this information also is really helping to inform how we might actually completely reshape the diagnostic criteria for preeclampsia to hopefully further minimise risks for women and babies in those pregnancies. At a trials level, I lead the Protect Me trial, which is a clinical trial that is translating work that was led by Euan and Susie Miller in the laboratory, whereby an antioxidant known as melatonin looks to provide really significant benefit in lamb models in terms of protecting the fetal brain from oxidative stress that's sustained in utero in pregnancies impacted by early onset fetal growth restriction. So we're looking to see in mothers that we're supplementing with melatonin, can we actually help to protect the fetal brain and see if we can improve neurodevelopmental outcomes and minimise their risks of cerebral palsy when we assess these children again when they're 2 years of age. On a very similar vein, we're starting a new clinical trial next year as well, which is the Prolong trial, which is also taking research developed within the Ritchie Centre and led by a BMed Sci student who went on to do a PhD with Euan, Sarah Marshall and myself, looking at sulforaphane. And sulforaphane is another antioxidant that appears that it may provide significant benefit in women with early onset preeclampsia to try and stabilise their disease. Now, both these conditions do not have any treatments. So if these trials were successful, this really does provide a huge benefit whereby within the Ritchie Centre, we've taken novel findings and translated them all the way through to potentially completely change clinical practice. So this is just some of the example of research that we do within the department, and it would be great to see some of you in the department in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. So Michelle Giles was to be with us, but again, she's actually had to do some urgent work because of COVID, believe it or not. So it's affecting our event in more ways than one. Michelle is a senior ID physician. She leads the ID, so infectious diseases pregnancy clinic here at Monash Medical Centre, and is a senior academic in the Department of O&G. So I promised that I would try and do justice to her slide. So essentially, she's an infectious diseases physician interested in public health, and her work is focused on infectious diseases and immunization in pregnancy, not just against those infections in pregnancy. So her key infections of interest are hepatitis B and C, and she has a number of projects exploring the influence that hepatitis might have on other pregnancy disorders like gestational diabetes. She's of course interested in COVID, and she can't be here because of COVID-19 and work she's doing on behalf of the Department of Health. And she's interested in maternal immunization. So not just how do we improve maternal immunization uptake in pregnancy, but other effects of maternal immunization on other pregnancy outcomes. And she has very recently shown, her and her group have very recently shown that immunizing women against pertussis, so whooping cough, and influenza is associated with significant reductions in key outcomes like stillbirth and hypertension and preterm birth. And she has a whole suite of laboratory-based projects exploring why that might be. What is immunizing women against pertussis and influenza doing to the mother's immune trajectories during pregnancy that might reduce the outcomes of those very serious, or the rates of those very serious outcomes. Of course, she's interested in antibiotic use in pregnancy, both overuse but better targeted use, and along with Ben Moll and Ryan Hodges, who is also in the department and is the head of the Women's and Newborn Programme at Monash, is exploring antibiotic use in women at very high risk of preterm birth. And then lastly, of course, she's interested in COVID, particularly in responses in immunocompromised or immunosuppressed women. So really, there have been questions as we've gone along. I might ask Shelley before she goes, just to tell us, or Vithya, to tell us where this recording of this session might be available. And as we do that, I'm going to cut to probably the most important presenter of the afternoon, which is Suwandi Dewapura. Suwandi is a current honours student with us in the department. And so over to you, Suwandi.
Thank you, Prof. Hi, everyone. I'm Suwandi. I'm a medical student, and I'm a student of Professor Euan Wallace and Dr. Miranda Davies this year, and I'm doing a BMed Sci with them. I've been asked to give you a quick overview of being a student in the department. So I thought I'll start by broadly describing what sort of research you can do. Slide. Yep, so there are basically 4 types of research that you can do in ONG. I think in the next session, you'll talk a bit more about lab projects. That's sort of like the bottom right picture there, and animal studies as well. So there are opportunities to work with mice and sheep and different animals, and you might get to do some procedures and things, which is really cool. There is also an opportunity to do clinical projects, so sort of like the top left there. So you might get to go to clinic or attend births or go to theatre. And then lastly, there are opportunities to do population health projects, sort of like the top right there. So that's sort of what I'm doing this year. I'm looking at perinatal mortality in Victoria. So that's babies who die either before they're born or shortly after. And we've gotten some really cool results that will hopefully change practice and help reduce the number of babies who die in the perinatal period in Victoria, which is really exciting and definitely not something that I expected to be a part of as a BMed Sci student, but I feel very fortunate to have had this opportunity, and it's been a great experience. Slide. Yep. So a bit of an overview about choosing your supervisors. Monash is probably one of the biggest places for ONG in Victoria, and because of that the supervisors are quite extraordinary people, and I know that a lot of the students have had a similar experience to me in that we found it quite nerve-wracking to approach some of the supervisors. So I just wanted to briefly talk about that. In the last few months of having worked with Professor Wallace and a number of the other researchers who have presented today, they've all been amazing, really nice, and they are very approachable and really love teaching and having students. So I just wanted to say, if there's someone that you come across who you really want to work with and learn from next year, don't hesitate to get in touch with them. They'll be happy to talk to you and try help you find a project that you'd be interested in, and that will be good for you to do next year. And the same with the research team. So when you join onto a project with your supervisor, as well as your main 2 supervisors, you sort of join a broader research group. And I've had a really great experience with all the staff on Professor Wallace's team. They're all really nice and always very willing to help. Even though I'm not one of their main students, they always treat me like I am, always answer my questions to the best of their ability, and it's made working with the group a really great experience for me. In terms of being a student in the ONG department, ONG is probably one of the most popular departments that students choose to do BMed Sci in, and because of that there's quite a big group of us in the department. That's in comparison to some of my friends who are doing BMed Science in other departments. They might be like the only student in the area and they feel a bit more isolated. But for us, we've sort of had the whole group to go through the year with. We've done our oral presentations together, we practice together. If anyone's having a problem with data analysis or anything, we all work together to solve it. So it's been really nice to work in that environment, and it's made the whole year probably one of the best years of my university experience. So if you think you might be interested in O&G research, I definitely encourage you to get in touch with some of the supervisors that you've heard from today, and they'll be more than happy to chat with you. And you're always welcome to email me if you have any questions as well. Thank you.
Great, so Andy, thank you so much, and thank you all of you. So please, if there are any questions, please type away and ask us. I hope you've seen just a very whirlwind soup song of what is available in research in the department. It genuinely is from laboratory all the way through to population. And one of you asked in the question and answer panel, where do students go after doing research? And I think the answer to that is the same for us as it is for many of the other research-rich departments in the university. Actually, the students go all over the place in terms of career options. Some stay and do PhDs, some go into education, some remain in the laboratories but not doing further research studies, and some go into completely different industries. So please, the menu of research options open to you is very rich indeed, from fundamental laboratory-based, animal-based research, all the way through to whole of population. I think the key thing, the unifying theme of all the research in the department, something I'm very proud of, is that the questions that are being asked by all the people you've heard from this afternoon and all of their colleagues, all of the questions they're asking are directly focused on improving the health outcomes for women and their children. So please, if anything has grabbed you, write to us, email us, and explore with a number of potential supervisors. We'd love to see you come and do research with us next year in O&G at Monash Medical Centre. Thank you.